Every village have a real bad man, and St. Victoria Village was no exception. It had Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer was a real bad man, and not even Big Joe would venture to cross his path. Besides, everybody knew that Mr. Spencer had a gun, and they knew he had used it once or twice too. Mr. Spencer didn't even go out of his way to interfere with anybody, but everybody knew what happened to anybody who was foolish enough to interfere with Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer had a reputation. Now, at the time I am speaking of, every morning when Mr. Spencer got up, he made the sign of the cross and went and cleaned his teeth and then left the house and went into the open yard to look at his banana. He had a lovely banana tree. Its trunk was beautiful and long and graceful, the leaves wide and shiny, and in the morning, with the dewdrops glinting silvery on them, it seemed like something to worship. At least Mr. Spencer thought so. Mr. Spencer's wife used to say to him, Selwyn, you look like you're bewitched or something. Every morning, as God sent, I see you out there looking up in that banana tree. What happened? Is you woman or something? Don't tell me you're starting to go dotish. And Mr. Spencer would say, Look, woman, mind your own business, eh? And if she was near him, she would collect a clout around her head, too. So one morning, Mrs. Spencer got vexed and said, You're going to have to choose between me and that blasted banana tree. Okay, you can pack up and go as you please, Mr. Spencer said. So Mrs. Spencer went home to her mother. But all said and done, Mrs. Spencer really loved her husband. So after 2 days, she came back and begged him for forgiveness. Mr. Spencer said, Good, you have learned your lesson. You know now just where you stand. Yes, Selwyn, Mrs. Spencer said. That is a good banana tree, Mr. Spencer said. When the banana ripe and you eat them, you will be glad I take such good care of the tree. Yes, Selwyn, she said. Then one day, another bad man came to live in the village. He was the biggest and toughest man anybody had ever seen. He had long hairy arms and a big square head and a wide mouth. His name was Bulldog. Everybody said, one of these days, Bulldog and Mr. Spencer going clash. Two bad men can't live in the same village. And they told Mr. Spencer, Bulldog will beat you. Beat who? Beat who? Beat who? Mr. Spencer said. He always repeated everything 3 times when he was indignant. And Bulldog said, Who this Spencer is? Show him to me. So one evening, they took Bulldog out by Mr. Spencer's, and he came up where Mr. Spencer was watering his tree and said, You is this, Mr. Spencer? How'd I get your business? Mr. Spencer asked. Well, this is how. If you is this Spencer man, I can beat you. Bulldog always came straight to the point. Who says so? Who says so? Who says so? I say so. And may I ask who the hell you is? Mr. Spencer asked. Where you come from? You never hear about me? Bulldog said, surprised. Read any newspaper that prints since 1950, and you will see that I always getting convicted for wounding with intent. I is a master at wounding with intent. I would wound you with intent as soon as I look at you. You want to taste my hand? Mr. Spencer didn't want to, however. He looked Bulldog up and down and said, Well, I ain't denying you might stand up to me for a few minutes. He paused for a moment and then said, But I bet you ain't got a banana tree like mine. He had Bulldog there. Bulldog said, Man, them is the biggest bananas I ever see in my whole life. Let me taste one. One a which? One a which? One a which? Bulldog didn't like this. Look, if you get too powerful with me, I bet you lose the whole damn bunch. Bulldog left, but he vowed to taste one of Mr. Spencer's bananas, if it was the last thing he ever did. Mrs. Spencer told her husband, Don't go and bring yourself in any trouble with that jailbird. Give he a banana and settle it. Not for hell, Mr. Spencer said. If he want trouble, he come to the right place. Let me catch him round that banana tree. I waiting for he. A few days passed. Bulldog had tried to forget Mr. Spencer's bananas, but he couldn't. He couldn't put them out of his mind. He got up and went to Mr. Spencer. Mr. Spencer was in the yard feeling the bananas. He was saying to himself, Boy, these looking real good. I going to pick them tomorrow. Bulldog stood up at the edge of Mr. Spencer's land. He didn't want to offend him by trespassing. He called out, Mr. Spencer, please give me one of your bananas. Mr. Spencer turned round and saw him. He said, Look, get out of my sight before I go and do something ignorant. And Bulldog said, This is your last chance. If I don't get a banana now, you're losing the whole bunch. You hear? But look at. Mr. Spencer was so mad, he could scarcely talk. Now Bulldog was a conscientious thief. He had certain moral scruples. He liked to give his victims a 50-50 chance. He said, I'm going to thief your bananas tonight, Spencer. Don't say I ain't tell you. You is an idiot, Mr. Spencer called back. Why you don't come? I got a rifle and I will clap a shot in the seat of your pants, so help me. Anyhow, I going to thief your bananas, Bulldog said. I can't resist it no more. As soon as you're ready, but anything you get, you take. That is okay, Bulldog said. I take in all of them. I will thief bananas between 6 o'clock tonight and 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. Mr. Spencer went inside and cleaned his gun. Mrs. Spencer said, But look how two big men going kill themselves over a bunch of bananas. Why you don't go and pick them bananas and make sure he can't get them? Woman, Mr. Spencer replied, this is a matter of principle. I refuse to take the easy way out. Bulldog is a blasted robber and he must be stopped. And I, Adolphus Selwyn Mackenzie Hezekiah Spencer, is the onlyest man to do it. Now, you go and boil some black coffee for me. I will have to drink it and keep awake tonight if I is the one to stand up for law and order. At 6 o'clock, Mr. Spencer sat down at his back door with his rifle propped upon the step and trained on the banana tree. He kept his eyes fixed there for the slightest sign of movement and didn't even blink. It was a lovely moonlight night. If he think I am making sport, let him come, let him come, let him come. 7, 8, 9, 10, even 12 o'clock, and no sign of Bulldog. And Mr. Spencer hadn't taken his eyes off the banana tree once. In the moonlight, the tree stood there lovely and still, and the bananas glistened. Mr. Spencer said, "They're real good. Now I go and pick them tomorrow without fail." Mrs. Spencer said, "Look, Selwyn, come, Larry got to bed. The man ain't a fool. He ain't coming." "Ain't 2 o'clock yet," Mr. Spencer said. And all the time, Mrs. Spencer kept him supplied with the bread and black coffee. He took his food with one hand and disposed of it without ever taking his eyes off the tree. The other hand he kept on the gun, one finger on the trigger. He was determined not to take his eyes off the tree. 1 o'clock, no Bulldog. 1:30, no Bulldog. 1:45, no Bulldog. Mrs. Spencer said, "The man ain't coming. Larry go to bed. It's 1:45 now." "We may as well wait until 2 and done now," Mr. Spencer said. 1:10, no Bulldog. "This is waste of time, waste of good time," Mr. Spencer said. At 1 minute to 2, Mr. Spencer looked at his wristwatch to make sure and turned his head and said to his wife, "But look how this damn vagabond make we waste with good time." Then he looked back at the banana tree. He stared, his mouth open wide. The banana tree stood there empty, and the only indication that it had once proudly displayed its prized bunch of bananas was the little stream of juice that was dribbling down from the bare broken stem.